Thank you very much, colleague, for attending our conference today on remote working. You know more than better that we have been fighting for introducing more flexibility on the work on our institution. We have to recognize that the COVID has been helping us in showing what we were preaching even before, so that we can be not only as effective as being in the office, but eventually even more. And telework, hybrid work is not something that can be perceived to be a gift or something that is a sort of bargain to be given. Cannot be just trivialized as working in front of the TV, watching the movie, as some managers still can try to preach. So we have now the proof that we can be effective even 100% of teleworking as during the COVID. We are now clearly in a situation in which hybrid work is the rule. Then the matter is how many days, how you could organize your time. For our staff that is expat, how many days you can spend abroad, nearby your family, for example. And we are struggling for having more, trying to build on the best possible experience and benchmarks. We have seen all the polls. Anthony, we will show the results of the staff consultation in France, but they are quite in line with the results of our own consultation made by our own administration. So there is a massive support of telework. There is a massive request of telework by the newcomers. All people in charge of recruiting staff in the Commission are confirming that the first question asked by the young candidates is it hybrid work allowed or not? Much more than how much I will get as a pension after 35 years or how many promotion I can get. This seems to be really the first priority. And we all know that our institution is exactly struggling on recruiting young candidates, and it is a big concern. And we have already been mentioning to the commissioner that to have more hybrid work, more flexibility is the only way if we want to modernize our own administration. We also know whenever we preach for that, we get some very few, but important to take into account remarks. So those who are saying, yes, but hybrid work is just distracting team spirit. We don't know each other. We cannot be imposed on be on telework. I cannot work at home because my house is little or because I'm not comfortable at home. It must be really confirmed that hybrid work is not an obligation. Under the present rules, if you want to go 5 days a week in the office, you are totally allowed. And you are also entitled to get your office arranged accordingly, because hybrid work with dynamic office can be eventually an option, but to be on dynamic office 5 days a week is not an option. So we got the agreement with the administration that if you really want to stay at office, your office will be eventually organized differently. And why Anthony is with us? Not only because he's a so good and known expert, because we came across an article based on his study, and we have found exactly what we are afraid of. That sometimes to ask people come back to office is not just because you consider it is better, but you want to put pressure on him on air in order to either fire or to impose mobility, and is what we consider to be totally unacceptable. That's why we will go through his presentation, and I really thank Anthony for being with us, because as usual, we build our own precision on the best expert available, because we want to provide our staff and our institution with the best possible knowledge and experiences, especially building on the benchmark of the more modern member states. So Anthony, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, I'm happy to be with you today to share some what I think key ideas about remote work. But the first thing I would like to say is that I'm a bit surprised to have to make a presentation today about remote work because especially in 2025, many of us have experienced remote work for several years, particularly since the pandemic. For most, remote work involved a hybrid model, balancing days at home with days in the office. And I would have thought 5 years ago that in 2025, working remotely would just be normal, a normal work practices. But it's not actually. It's not. And this is what we're going to try to understand why remote working is still not a new normal in 2025. But actually, the pandemic is, and it's the first idea I would like to introduce here, the pandemic has little to do with the development of remote work. It has helped, of course, but the development of remote work is more the result of a shift in our economy to a knowledge economy, that happened, well, more or less during the 90s, an economy based on the processing and production of data in different ways, text, pictures, sound, videos, video games, and so on. A lot of workers now, especially in Western countries, are data processors workers. I mean that we process data in a way or another. And a key characteristic of this knowledge-based economy is the fact that we work in a non-synchronous way. It means that our collective activities can occur without everyone being present simultaneously. And it's a big change, if we compare with the industrial economy, where people had to gather together in a plant in order to produce collectively. That is not the case anymore. We can produce in a non-synchronous way, And of course, this flexibility has been supported by the advancement in mobile technologies, smartphone, laptop, internet connection, which have been pivotal over the past decade. So I would say that remote work is more a byproduct of the evolution of economy and technology, where the value that we create in our job is derived from data processing and computers. On the other hand, we can also add that the success of remote work is also due to some social evolution, leading to new expectation at work. People are, generally speaking, more well educated, and they think for autonomous and responsibility. And in that sense, remote work fit with this, at least some of this new expectation. But surprisingly enough, we have noticed a recent decline in remote work across various sectors, notably in the high-tech sector, that is supposed to be a progressive one, leading some question if we are witnessing the end of remote work or not, So the question is, why is there such a debate, surrounding remote work? Why are so many companies, Amazon, but also some administration, you've just seen, in United States, some Amazon and plenty of other companies, encouraging a return to the office. Let's go to the second slide. The first thing that we can say about remote work is that it does not change the way we work. So that's why this fear about remote work seems even more surprising, While it is often portrayed as a transformative shift for company and individual, the reality is that it does not fundamentally alter how we work. We use the same device. Well, most of the time, it's our laptops, the same tools, most of the time, the same software, our software that we can use. We are using the same, software at home or in our office, and we handle the same data and documents. Plus, we collaborate with the same colleagues, we serve the same clients, we work within the same organization, the same companies. We, of course, may not physically see our colleagues daily, but still we are here talking about hybrid, way of working where we balance, days at work and this at work, but still we communicate by using the same tools, primarily email. So I mean that remote work does not change the core organization of our work or the outcome we produce. We still produce the same thing wherever we work, But, however, there is a significant implication of this evolution, for the organization. The office, the building, the office is no longer essential for productivity. And I think this is a key point. We do not need, at least in this knowledge, based economy, of course, I'm talking only about that. We do not need an office to produce. That's in a way something that is pretty recent. This evolution has happened 20 years ago with the evolution of the mobile technology. Before that, we still needed a proper office to work and to produce. We needed a proper printer, we needed a proper wired internet connection, we needed a proper desktop computer, and so on. We do not need all of that. So it means that we can produce wherever we are, and the office is no longer essential for productivity. Well, it means that remote work does not change the way we work, but it has changed, let's say, radically, the role of the building and the role of our office. And we will go back to that later on. But first, I would like to talk a bit about the potential negative effect of remote work on employee. Well, first thing first, let's insist on the positive effect. The positive effect on employee is that remote work most of the time, suit employees. 8 workers out of 10 believe that they are more efficient when working remotely. And 50% more or less of the remote worker, that are the last figures that I found about remote work, at least for France, but I'm sure that in Europe is more or less the same thing. All of the studies that we have, they all go to the same numbers more or less. And 1 in 2, remote worker will be willing to resign if this option were taken away. So I mean that for most of the remote worker, potential or current one, remote work is a decisive factor in choosing their next job. People don't want to go back to their office full time, and even more, returning to the office is not even an option anymore for a lot of people, simply because they have shaped their life around remote work. They have created new lifestyle, around remote work. And plus, they feel much more autonomous, more responsible, and generally speaking, more in control of their professional life, But we also have to raise the point that remote work can have negative effect on people. And we have to be here aware of that. You know, remote work offers flexibility and convenience for most of us, but it also presents potential challenges, particularly for those who work remotely full time. That's the part of the remote worker population that is at risk, you know, the remote worker working remotely full time. One significant issue here is the increased disposability of remote workers. You know, the lack of physical presence can make easier for employees to overlook their contributions, you know, potentially leading to job insecurity. Plus, another thing that is important to notice, especially if you're working with young employees, is the fact that they may struggle with socialization. And once again, we are talking about a full-time, you know, remote worker. Missing out on the network and camaraderie that an office, you know, environment provide, and that is very important, especially at the beginning of your career. It's an important way, probably the best way to learn, you know, about your sector, about the habits, about the routine, about the way to behave, about the vocabulary, and so on. Another limit of remote work is the fact that it can lead to some kind of invisibility of the worker, especially for support roles, you know, like assistant, who may become just a kind of email address, you know, where people send their request without knowing, you know, the person behind the email address. And so in that case, this assistant are not valued, you know, as a team member. I remember that once we had a conversation here in my university, and one of the member assistant say, well, she was talking about the researchers. They don't know who we are, and we don't know who they are, simply because this person was working mainly, you know, remotely, and she had the feeling that she was just an email address, you know. So that's something that has to be considered seriously when you manage a team of remote workers. Another potential negative effect of remote work is the lack of visibility that can also make workers feel that their efforts are unseen and underappreciated. There is no physical presence to simply showcase their dedication, you know. Let's think of an assistant, for example, who spend hours per day only replying to mails. You know, if you're spending 2, 3, 4 hours a day, you know, replying emails, it can be completely invisible when you're working remotely. You know, and your manager can ask what you're doing at home. You know, because we cannot see anything about what you're producing. So that's something that is very, I think, important to take into consideration. Remote work can also have a broader implication for the workforce. It can exacerbate issues of isolation, especially for people living alone or in the countryside, for example, where it's very difficult to create other social relation outside of work. It can also lead to some inequalities between workers, simply because we do not see or realize what people are really doing, and it can affect the health of our worker. but this issue are particularly true for the full-time remote worker. If you balance days at home and days at work, studies show that you do not suffer most of the time. You do not suffer from these issues. Let's move to the next slide number 5. Another thing about remote work that has to be discussed here is how it can be divisive. Divisive because it creates a gap, not only in companies, in organization, but in the society. A gap between the one who can work remotely and the one who just simply cannot, for different reasons, work remotely. And remote work, and I think that's something that we should pay attention, might appear as a privilege for people who are already quite privileged, In France, for example, it's only 1 out of 2 people who work remotely. It means that it's only a minority of workers who can work remotely. And among this minority of workers, 61% are executive. It means that most of the remote workers are well-educated people and people earning a salary and income way above the average one. So in that case, remote work can be seen as a privilege for the privileged one. And it can create a shift and inequalities between the data processors who can work remotely and people, working with physical material, that have to work on site, And we have to be careful, especially in a society where we can already see, some ruptures, between people, between what we call the anywhere and the somewhere, between people with a high level of education and with people having a less educated background, So we really have to be careful, I think, of that, because it can exacerbate, the tension in our society. Well, as we can see here, remote work does not change the way we work. It makes people happy. It can raise some concern, but mainly for the full-time remote worker, and it can also be divisive in the society. But I would like now to move to the main, I think, issue, the main point about remote work is the gap between the remote workers and their managers. Managers has always shown reluctance toward remote work. A significant portion of French managers, approximately 70%, they have expressed, the belief that remote work complicates teamwork. This suggests that managers feel physical presence, as a crucial part, of their work, And of course, the absence of physical presence might hinder spontaneous discussion, team cohesion, and immediate problem solving. which are, we have to be honest here, often facilitated by a shared workspace. As a consequence, 40%, and I think it's a significant portion, of manager, 40% of French manager are now considering reducing remote work arrangements in the coming years. This indicates a growing preference among management for returning to a more traditional office setting. So we can see here another tension in the world of work between manager and employees. Employees want to work remotely even more, while manager wants the opposite. And I think it will create a lot of tension, or it already creates a lot of tension, and it will create even more tension because once again, people, and especially young people, wants to be much more autonomous. They want to be much more in control with their work, and it's a significant aspect of their work condition. So it means that some company would probably struggle to hire what we call talent, But on the other hand, I think it's important to consider the managers' doubt and fears about remote work. They are, I think, legitimate. We have to listen carefully, managers. I think they are right to pay attention to the quality of work, but are they right to doubt about remote work? Maybe not, because once again, a lot of studies have shown now this last few years that remote work does not really have an impact on productivity, especially in a hybrid mode. Some studies have shown that a full-time remote work can have a negative impact on the productivity, more or less 10%, but not the hybrid mode. But I think fundamentally remote work forces managers to change the way we manage. Remote work does not change what we produce, does not change the way we organize our work on a daily basis, but it changes radically the way managers manage. And remote work, to be even more precise, called the management culture into question, and here is probably the main issue about remote work. Well, let's explain a bit this point. That is, I think, a key one in this presentation. Management is historically based on distrust and physical control. It is rooted in the development of the industrial economy, where people could be controlled physically, where the physical presence was a necessary condition to produce. If you want to produce a car, you have to go to a factory. You cannot produce a car at home. So it means that most of our management culture is still based on this idea that the physical present is required to produce. That's the first point. The second point is about the relation and about the role of employees. Because the management culture is still rooted in this industrial economy. Employees are still seen as resources, employees is still seen as a number of hours that can be used to produce value, a number of hours or days or months or whatever. And time is a resource for employees. It's what they pay for. You know, any kind of contract, work contract, is based on an exchange between time and money. You know, as an employee, you sell your time for money. So what the employers buy here is money, is time, sorry. But employers buys time. And the best way to control and use these resources is to get the employees in their office. When you can see them, it's quite reassuring because you know that the resource that you paid for is properly used, you know. But with remote work, of course, we cannot fully control our employees, and we have to trust them. So remote work leads to a major change in the management culture, a shift from the distrust to the trust, a shift from the management of people as resources to the management of people as partners that we have to trust, partners that we know that we can rely on, you know? And let's move now to the slide number 8. And I think this is a major revolution in management that has still to come. You know, I think a lot of managers have still a management culture that is anchored into the industrial economy, and we can understand that. And I think we also have probably to question, you know, education, management education. But are they the only reason why companies are encouraging a return to the office? I don't think so. The return to office policy is also justified by other reasons. And one of them is the need to increase productivities, and have said before, it's absolutely not backed up by science, but still it's a reason why managers justify the return to office policy. And another reason is because is to justify, the cost of the facilities, you know, the cost of the building, the cost of the offices. A building costs a lot to maintain, you know. And how do you justify this cost if most of people work remotely? So to justify the cost of the facilities, we have to have people working in their office. That's also simply a reason, you know, for calling people back to their office. Another reason for the return to office policy is simply because we do not assume a poor management and leadership. I think that's also another main reason. For a lot of people, what they do does not make any sense. For a lot of people don't really understand why they are doing what they do. A lot of people are not sure about the usefulness of their job. So it means that by encouraging people to return to the office, managers think that they can force them to be more productive. But wherever you work, if your job does not make sense, if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you cannot make a good job. You know, we make a good job only if what we are doing makes sense, only if what we are doing has a purpose, not only for the company, but also for us, you know? So I think the meaning of our work is also very, very important. And we do not create a sense, meaning about what we do by simply returning to the office. Well, I think it's time to conclude now about this presentation. We have raised already several points, and I'm sure it will trigger a lot of questions. And I'm looking forward to discussing this point with you. But just a few words here to conclude. The first point is that remote work has offered a great opportunity to people to get the control of their work back. We feel much more in control when we work remotely, simply because we can organize a bit more our time, a bit more the way we work. We feel much more responsible. There are some risks. We have seen them. But generally speaking, we can say that remote work participates in the fulfillment of people at work. Of course, once again, doing a job that does not make any sense for you, doing it remotely will not change anything about that. But we can say that remote work help people to enjoy a bit more their work, at least for most of them, not for all of them. Another key point here is the fact that remote work does not change a lot of things that we do, does not change what we produce, how we produce, but it changed radically the way we manage. And a revolution in management has to happen if we want remote work to be normalized. And I think this is the main issue that I've tried to raise here in this presentation.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Go on.
The last point before starting the discussion, the last point is that we should not forget is the fact that remote work is and will remain only for a minority. We should never forget that, because all of the debates that we have about remote work are debates about and for most of the time privileged people. And I think this is a very, very important point. Remote work is only for a minority, and it can be a divisive practice. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much to you, Anthony. I think that colleagues have found on your presentation lots of position that we have been putting forward with our institution. Actually, the former commissioner that was pushing for hybrid work has started mentioning that we must introduce what he was called culture of trust, and we fully support this approach. Concerning the poor leadership and management, he was also underlying that a manager must lead by example. It is not always the case. It was quite ridiculous to see whenever the offices has been adapted to the work with more open space, more dynamic office. Some director general were totally in line with the approach, accepting this also for them, but some others were just building castles, sometimes with glasses, but to keep their own office, because we are in an institution, Anthony, that for years and years has established rules concerning the size of the office, depending on your grade, on your hierarchy, how many windows you are entitled to get, which kind of table and chairs you are entitled to get. So to have a director general sharing an open space was totally a revolution, very well accepted by some, but very strongly refused by others. A question that I would like to to raise with you, and I invite colleagues to put their own question in the chat in order to have this discussion. Of course, you can also do it in French. Did you find any difference between private and public administration? So it's more common to have flexibility in the work in the administration that normally has the kind of task that are more teleworkable that on some other private sector. And we have experience in this respect at the central level, at the local level. There is a tendency that you can eventually establish, so it depends on the managers and the director general responsible for each and every service.
Well, yes, for the simple reason that in administration, people are working all of them on data, or at least, yeah, most of them are on data. So it has been a bit simpler to implement remote work, in administration than in companies. And another aspect that makes also simpler to work remotely when you're part of an administration is also that the part that even if, of course, we have to be productive in different ways, we have to create value for people. That's our job for everybody here. But still, it's not a business. So the approach of productivity is also different. But of course, for people who have to meet a citizen, these people cannot work remotely. So I'm talking about notably the local administration, in towns, stuff like that, where you have to meet the citizen. So in that case, you cannot work remotely. But I will say that maybe in administration, yes, it's probably a bit more simple than in companies.
And another question that comes quite often is, beside the culture of trust, that is not that easy to put in place, especially when it comes to deal with the manager. They have a long experience in controlling and more acting as more police than managers, is the control of the time spent on telework. On your experience, is there any IT application, or it's just based on the trust of the people working remotely to encode themselves the time spent and then having a look eventually only at the result, or an hybrid procedure in which you look at the result but still control the time?
Well, it's very difficult to have some serious data about that, because the companies that control their employees with thanks to a software, they don't really want to communicate about that. It's not something that you want to communicate about. So it means that yes, we know that companies are using different ways to control their employees. There are some software that exists, but funny enough, there are also devices that exist, to avoid that. So it's a bit of a weird game between the employees and their employers, I think we should simply trust people. I think we should simply trust people for the simple reason, if the employers cannot trust the people they have hired, it simply means that they are bad managers. You know, as a manager, if you can trust the people that you have hired yourself or, you know, with the HR department, it simply means that you're not good at hiring people. So if you're not good at hiring people, what does it mean about yourself as a manager? You know? So that's why I think when you're a manager, you should trust the people you have hired. Otherwise, it just means that you are not a good
Good.
manager.
Yeah, there are two very interesting questions. The first from Atanasia is we are also ourselves in a very peculiar situation because we are almost all expat. So our families, our life, it's abroad. And for an international institution is a crucial item to be taken into account. So for us, there is a tension between hybrid work at home where we work, but also the possibility of working abroad, so near by our families. Do you have any experience on this respect? So to be flexible, not only for not being in the office, but also not being at home, being elsewhere, and still directly connected to your work.
Well, I don't have any data about this specific, you know, population, you know, but we know that what we call here the expat people are what we call the anywhere, you know, that are most of the time very well educated and very flexible, very mobile. So it means that they are most of the time probably more progressive than the other categories of the population. They are more willing to work remotely, and they are more willing to also experiment new ways of working. They have played a very important role in the development of this knowledge economy, you know, since 90s. They are are working, you know, in the co-working spaces, and they are the digital nomads and so on. So I don't have any data about the link between expat people and remote working, but what we know is that these expat people have participated, you know, a lot to the development and all of this new work practices. They are what we name what we call a creative class of worker. You know, a creative class of worker. Yeah.
There is another question from Pedro. It's true that there is a tension between the fact that in the public service, actually, perhaps you don't care so much on getting the best possible talents, while in the private sector is a crucial item if you want to get the best and the brightest. So in a way, the fact that the young generation are really keen on asking more flexibility put more pressure on the private sector because they cannot renounce to recruit the best and the brightest more than a public body, on which at the end of the story is not that crucial, even if on our own institution it becomes a problem. So how do you see this tension between the fact that in the private sector you could potentially not be so open on the for matter of productivity or for control on flexible work, but then the price to be paid is to renounce to recruit the brightest, and on the contrary, in the administration you could eventually allow the cost of not getting the best?
Well, first point, I don't see why we should not try to hire the best people in administration. I think we need good people, well trained people, and motivated people in our administration in order to offer the best quality of services possible to our citizens. But about the companies, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a bit ironic, you know, that to observe that companies that they need the most talented people to develop the most sophisticated innovation, you know, like Ubisoft for the video games or Amazon. They want their employees to go back to their office because it's the best way to probably lose some talents and to struggle to hire other ones, you know. So, well, I'm not sure that I can even explain that, you know. For me, it's not really rational, and I'm not sure that there is any explanation except the one that I've already provided, you know. The fact that probably the management culture is still too ingrained, you know, encored into this industrial, you know, way of thinking management and on organization at work.
Well, there is a colleague that I wouldn't mention in order to be recognized, that mentioned the case of the worst bad manager that one can imagine, the one who wants the staff to be in the office while he or she work remotely. So you impose something to your staff without leading by example, actually leading by the by example. Do you have any experience on this respect?
No, but no, I don't have any direct experience. But we know for a long time that leading by example is the best way to lead. It's not only backed up by studies in management, but it also backed up by studies in psychology and even now by neuroscience. You know, so because when you behave in a certain way, you encourage people to behave the same way. You know, because we imitate each other. You know, so if you want a change to happen, start with yourself. It's as simple as that. So, well, for this manager, you know, asking their staff to go back to their office while they stay at home, it's poor management. It's bad management.
Yeah, that's true. Hopefully, there are not that many. It was also quite positive to see that on the polls organized, we have seen managers to be largely in favor of of flexibility. We have also managers leading by example, being themselves in the office, considering that is also their duty to be there if even part of the staff is there, but allowing all the flexibility to the staff. So there are different experiences, but all in all, I've seen a dramatic change of mind on the managers after the pandemic. Before, most of the managers were really against any possible flexibility. Now it's much more in line with their way to see. There is a question of someone mentioning there is still a perception, whatever we can say, that being at home, you are not fully focused on your job. You do even private things, or you look at the television or whatever. And then how can we deal with it? I mean, the most evident answer is cultural trust. And cultural trust is not a check en blanc. Cultural trust means that you are going to check the results of the work, whatever the colleague has been organizing himself or herself. Is there any other way to deal with this concern that being at home, you actually go for shopping instead of working?
If someone has this doubt, I will reverse the question. Are we sure that someone in his office
Is working?
is really productive? Are you sure that spending 8 to 10 hours in an office makes us really productive? Well, we all know that we can spend hours in front of our computer and doing a lot of things, but our work, you know, it's easy to waste our time in an office doing something and doing, you know, a lot of other tasks that what we are supposed to do at work. And it's exactly the same thing at home, you know. Yes, you can work at home and waste your time doing other stuff, but once again, I mean, if what we do makes sense, if we know why we do what we are doing, if we understand the usefulness of our job, if we understand how we contribute to the society, to the community with our work, in that case, we work. In that case, we focus and we do what we have to do. And I think, I mean, at least in administration, it's probably a bit easier that for companies, you know. There are a lot of companies where it's difficult, you know, to make sense about what people do, especially when they participate in activities that they are harming the societies. But normally in administration, it should be easier, you know. If someone does not understand the usefulness of their job in an administration, it means that there is a problem here, because we are here normally to 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 serve people, to serve citizens, to serve the student as a professor, or to serve, you know, citizens at large for people working in the European institution. So it should be, I think, simpler for us, you know, to make sense of what we do. And if our job makes sense, we have no problem to be motivated. So there is no reason to not trust people doing a job that makes sense for them.
I'm not, we are convinced that our job makes sense. I'm not so convinced that in some member states, the bloody bureaucrats that we are so perceived to be useful, but it's a matter of communication. We are also, I wouldn't say even a question, is more Sari, who has been really leading the movement of managers supporting the she's confirming that she's in charge of 55 staff, and they are working very well at home, and they come to the office discussing. There are cases what must be discussed, because actually the structure of the hybrid work that we have is what you can do at home, you do it, but there are things that you cannot do at home because it's a matter of discussion with your colleagues, sharing experiences, and then you come to the office. Actually, we have a structure that is not even based on days spent at home or at the office. It's more percentage of your time. So it's totally possible, according to the present rules, to spend half day at home, then to come in the afternoon, or to come for a meeting and then to come back. Is also clear that is a bit divisive, because it depends when you live. If you live 1 hour by train from your office, you cannot just jump on your train, come back to at home. But I mean, this kind of proof that how effective we can go on this effective telework is important. For us, it's not possible to be 100% on telework. Unless you spend your day that are allowed abroad. So this idea of being totally outside your service is not an option. So there is no this risk, and it's important that you have underlined that all these prejudices are linked to the situation in which you never go to your office, and it's not the case to us. Frederic is mentioning a green dimension, because if you commute less, you spend less time on your car, pollution and whatever. I suppose there is also a concern that has been raised in France.
Well, there are several questions here. I'm going to answer the first one about what we do now in our office. And of course, it's still useful to go to our office, but not for the same reason anymore. If you have to write a report, it's probably better to stay at home than spending your day in an open space, you know? It means that the buildings have a new role, a different role. They are not there to produce, but they are more there to create, to socialize, you know, to create a social space where people can can spend time together, can be creative together, solve problem together, but they are not places to produce anymore, you know. And I think that's another massive shift for a lot of companies, you know. A lot of companies have to rethink the role of their building, of their offices, their facilities, you know, and they have to create space to facilitate, you know, the interaction, not space to facilitate the production, but the interaction at large. About the question about the impact of remote work on the environment. Well, there are a couple of studies showing that remote work can help to reduce our carbon footprint, and we can easily understand why, you know, because we take less our car and so on. But it's a very complex question because it depends if the facilities, the buildings are running the same way or not, if you're on site or not, because, you know, it's in some companies, even if you work remotely, even if most of people work remotely, the cost to maintain their building is the same, simply because the heating is still on and so on, or it's just a bit lower, but not that much. So it's very, very difficult to calculate. And another aspect of that is what we call the rebound effect of remote work. You can reduce your footprint by working at home, but because you will do other activities during the day, it will have an impact, a bad impact on the environment. So I mean that it's very, very complex question, and I can see a lot of positive effect of remote work, but I'm not so sure about the environmental, you know, consideration of remote work. I think we probably need here more studies.
Yeah, there is also a reflection made by Noemi. It's true that you cannot directly switch to working in the office and remotely, because sometimes you need also to get familiar with some IT tools and applications. So training effort and even managing tools for a video conference, as we are doing today, is useful. And then we recognize that our administration made an important effort on providing online training, all these activities that can help colleagues to get familiar with what we get. There is a question that our colleague considered himself to be polemic. He mentioned, I don't know if you have access to the question.
Yeah,
okay.
I can see the question. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So it's the question made by SE. Some tasks, the measure of success productivity appears to be speed. Nowadays with AI, a lot of such tasks can be done instantly. For some managers, how surprising quickly they are. For example, to reply to mails, send the reminder, and look at the task, organize meetings seems to be rather little time consuming, where is not the case after receiving at the end. Could you share views on your ideas what we measure of success at the receiving end?
That's a tough question, this one. Well, I think success at work should not be about replying emails, you know. I'm not sure that it's a measure of success. I'm not saying that we should not reply to our emails, but I'm not sure that we should measure our work, the productivity of our work with by the number of emails that we reply, you know, per day. So I think it's a good thing if artificial intelligence can speed up or even eliminate, all of this tiny task that requires a lot of time and energies, and sometimes it can consume most of our work day. So if artificial intelligence can help us with all of that, it's good news. But it means that in that case, we will have more time to focus on what we really create value for people. And it's probably not reminders or task allocation. And if artificial intelligence can help us to focus a bit more of what really create value for people, clients or citizens, it would be a good thing.
Are you so open with your students about it when they draft their written exams with artificial intelligence at the university?
Yes, of course. I mean, we are, as everybody else, we are experimenting a lot. I ask my students to use the artificial intelligence tools available. And of course, I'll also have to change the way we evaluate our students. Yeah, but now we are probably a bit more exigent about what they do, what they say. If what they say can be generated automatically by an artificial intelligence, we consider that it's not enough. And we are asking them much more that what an artificial intelligence can do. Yes, but as anyone else, I think we are experimenting, and the other thing is that is the rhythm of evolution, of these tools. Things are evolving really quickly, and throughout just an academic years, we can see a lot of different tools, launching on the market. So we try to experiment with all of them and see what we can do with them. But we don't have, of course, an ultimate answer or ultimate way of doing with this tool. Not at all.
I think that we come to the end of our very fruitful and passionate meeting, Tony. I see my colleague to be so happy about it that perhaps you will get some of their child and student to come to your university, Côte d'Azur. That is already a quite interesting location. So, and we are really happy about what you are putting forward. We are going to stand on that and build our position also on your own analysis. And we will be glad to get in touch even for a new conference in the future, and even updating the results of our own work together if there are new tendency or things that we can build on. The resistance to the hybrid work in our institution seems to be less strong than on other private and public bodies. It seems to be now part of the way to work. Actually, we cannot even come back to work to the office because there are no longer enough office for all the staff. So our institution for getting money has just sold several buildings. So we have now more or less a ratio of 70% of places of work towards the staff. So it will be physically impossible to say you come back to your office because there are not enough offices. But still, I mean, the resistance can be local with some managers, especially the old-fashioned ones, that they are still keeping on thinking that the only way to work is to work on the flicage and to look and control. They consider trust is a lack of productivity, but it's less common and very well perceived by anyone. And it's now clear that you cannot get any new young candidate if you not promise to get for flexibility at work. So if you don't do it, you just lose the brightest, the best, and the brightest. And I think there is a cost that even a public body cannot afford. So thank you very much again, Tony. And À la prochaine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me for this conference. Thanks for the invitation to give this this conference, and see you soon.
Bye bye.